If you have not seen the show we're about to take a probably not watch the whole thing because this is over 45 minutes. This is a long one. This is from Stam Fine. If you have not seen the television series Miami Vice, you are missing out on absolutely epic television. It's really, really, really good. It started out as an idea from Brandon Tartikoff, who was an executive in charge of programming for the American...
Lil Yane just followed on Kick.
Oh, Lil Yane, thank you for the follow. It started out as an idea jotted down by Brandon Tartikoff on a bar napkin. Tartikoff was an executive at the American television network NBC. And he was in a bar somewhere, and the cable channel MTV was on. This was back when MTV still existed, and back when they actually played music videos on television. And he wrote down on a bar napkin, just little glimmer of an idea he had. He wrote down MTV Cops. Now, meanwhile, you had a writer named Anthony Yerkovich who found this newspaper article in a major East Coast newspaper about how undercover police officers in Dade County in Florida, which is where Miami is located, were taking items seized in drug raids and reusing them as part of department-approved covers for their undercover police officers. Got to head out now. Talk to you later. Hope you all enjoy your Easter weekend. All right, Wacko. Take care. But from there, a convergence happened. And they got the idea to create a television show based in Miami about undercover cops fighting the war on drugs. And they decided to do it with a lot of style and flair. It's like that joke from GTA Vice City. They're fighting crime the hard way in designer clothes and a $250,000 sports car. Something to really capture the essence of the 1980s. And from there, a television phenomenon was born, Miami Vice. Let's take a look. This is from Stamfine. Miami Vice, be cool, stay cool, too cool.
Well, I'm all ears.
A pair of Vice cops investigate Miami's underworld in some stylish threads and cool wheels.
Hey, don't sweat it, man.
All the time finding as many network television-friendly euphemisms for sex and drugs as was possible.
Spreading around all this pharmaceutical rhino rinse.
So get ready to grind and recirculate while you nasally vacuum the naughty dust in Miami Vice.
Nice opening.
Must be rough and Vice, man. Cars, clothing.
Miami Vice, created by Anthony Yerkovich, ran on NBC for 5 seasons from 1984 and was a show that became synonymous with style and pop music. Yet it's far deeper than you would expect for an 80s TV show. Or
It really
It
was.
was just style over substance.
We're telling you that Godzilla and Rodan came by and immortalized me.
It's a show aimed at a mature audience rather than kids, though clearly it did have a pretty big following among those too young to drive in a Ferrari without wearing socks. They were also likely to be too young to drive a Ferrari with socks. In fact, forget the socks. The socks are irrelevant. Going forward, this channel will not concern itself with supercar drivers with smelly feet.
The smell goes away in a couple hours.
Miami Vice dwelt on the seedier side of the city's upwardly mobile and glamorous types. There was a mix of rich people involved in the drug trade, their customers, their victims, their suppliers, the people at the very bottom rung of society, and the cops charged with upholding the law. Miami Vice very quickly lets you know what it thinks.
It also dealt with a lot of people at the top of society, or at least at the top of certain rungs of society. Also, you go back and watch these old episodes and you see a lot of familiar faces that have become established actors now. Like, you know, you got this chap here, Stanley Tucci. He had at least 2 appearances in Miami Vice as different characters. You also saw there earlier, there was an appearance by a very young Julia Roberts. Trying to remember who all else they had. I know Bruce Willis was in one episode as a baddie. This was before he got the parts in Die Hard and even on Moonlighting. I don't know, there's a lot of people. And even the official Miami Vice YouTube page has done compilations of all the famous actors, famous musicians that have appeared. Really good, kind of funny episode that they did in the 2nd season, I believe. It was called Phil the Shill. And it was centered around a guest appearance by Phil Collins. And the pilot episode of Miami Vice really put the show on the map because they had this one sequence where it was just Crockett and Tubbs in the Ferrari Daytona driving late at night. No dialogue or anything, just Phil Collins in the air tonight playing. Whole scene, absolute vibe. One of my favorite actors, Stanley Tucci, played Puck in Midsummer Night's Dream. Yes, brilliant actor. And some of his early roles on Miami Vice. Guy on the right looks familiar. Does he? I don't know who he is. Vice City somehow managed to perfectly capture the 80s, yet be completely exaggeratory about it. Yeah, they did. I think it's because of Vice City we had a sort of revival started in the 2000s of 80s pop music being revisited and in a positive light. Only seen Miami Vice referenced, seen the A-Team and Knight Rider. A lot of those were on around the same time as Miami Vice, but Vice was different. It hit different. It was made different. It was a cultural zeitgeist phenomenon is a good way to describe it.
Of the justice system by completely bypassing it for the resolution of most episodes. The series follows the detectives of the Organised Crime Bureau of what was then Metro-Dade Police, or OCB for short. But most of the time, the team is known as Miami Vice. So that's where they get the name of the show from. I feel so stupid now.
Everybody freeze, Miami Vice!
The OCB's usual beat was narcotics, prostitution, gambling, fraud, smuggling, arms dealing, violent crimes, etc. But over the course of the series, OCB would be involved with any crime you could think of, whether it just be a simple homicide, a home invasion, a little mild terrorism, some international intrigue, and if you pick the show on a bad day, UFOs.
Oh yeah, that was one of those episodes that really jumped the shark. Also had James Brown as both a on-camera and a musical guest for the program that week. Yeah, season 4, they kind of lost their way. And season 5, they got a little bit of their mojo back, but it was never really the same. And season 5 just took a really, really dark turn over and over again for all of the characters until finally it just all came crashing down in the finale. They were also, I think at the time, dropping quickly in the ratings. You know, the whole thing had kind of run its course. People are tired of Miami Vice. They ended up cutting the run of Miami Vice short, only airing about half the episodes. And then the other half, I think like 13 of them, they called them the lost episodes at one point. They just took those and aired those on the then fledgling USA cable network. And we're just done with it, which is what some American television networks would do throughout the 80s into the 90s, 2000s onward. If a show was not doing very well in prime time on the network, they would go to a cable channel and the rest of the episodes would just air in a sort of regular rotation. And that's what happened with the last season of Miami Vice.
Not gonna go look for little green men with you.
Suppose we find some.
The OCB team often worked deep undercover, inhabiting separate personas, and at times it's hard for them to return to their normal lives. Where does the fake drug dealer end and the real cop begin? Look, I've been much the same. It's very hard to switch off after I get home from work. After a full day at the funeral home, I often have to stop myself from embalming the parrot.
So you'll set up a meet.
There's also a little bit of a problem sometimes with us VTubers. Sometimes it can be difficult to know where the persona leaves off and where the real us begins. I'd like to think there's been a little bit of an integration between the Lord Rexworth VTuber and me as a person. Or, as Cary Grant once said, I pretended to be somebody else until I became that person, or he became me, or we met somewhere in between.
Meeting between Burnett and his Bahamian banker friend, Mr. Cooper.
Detective John Sonny Crockett was a Vietnam vet working Vice, where he often worked undercover.
Wait, what?
Sonny Crockett.
Burnett and his Bahamian banker friend, Mr. Cooper.
Detective John Sonny Crockett.
No, that's not right. That's not John, it's James Sonny Crockett. There's a little bit of a blend, yeah. That guy might have been Crocodile Dundee's girlfriend, would be husband from the first movie. Oh, really? Interesting.
Was a Vietnam vet working Vice, where he often worked undercover using the alias Sonny Burnett. As part of his cover, he had to maintain a lifestyle that would help him infiltrate Miami's underworld. So he wore fashionable threads, drove a Ferrari.
The idea, actually, all of the wardrobe from Miami Vice was the vision of a costume designer named Jodie Tillett. She was also the costume designer for the James Bond film License to Kill, which part of it was filmed in Florida. Don Johnson, who played Crockett, originally had the idea that he wanted the character of Crockett to wear, blue jeans, denim jacket, cowboy boots, that sort of thing. Showrunners absolutely refused that. They said, no, you're going to be wearing a lot of linen and cotton blend clothing, loose, unconstructed jackets, oversized t-shirts, linen trousers, and slip-on loafers, no socks. He was quite fortunate he lost that battle with the showrunners because he was completely unprepared and caught off guard by the heat and humidity in South Florida. So not only was this a quite fashionable choice, from a functionality standpoint, it was perfect because it kept him cool during long days of filming. Is there a great difference between the real person and the VTuber persona? I wouldn't have a difference. It's exhausting enough maintaining all the personalities I already have. I mean, it all just sort of blends, I think. It all just sort of blends. Blue hair, blue tie, hiding in your Wi-Fi. For me, what you see is what you get. Yeah, and I'm the same way in large part.
Infiltrate Miami's underworld, so he wore fashionable threads, drove a Ferrari, he lived on a boat, and had a pet alligator, Elvis. He'd been married and has a son. He's divorced because the job was so all-consuming. Sonny Crockett is...
Yeah. That was the story arc for the first few episodes. Crockett dealing with the broken marriage. Finally, the show really found itself maybe about 6 episodes in, where they just sort of settled things with Crockett and his family to where they divorced. Wife took the child, went up north, and he was sort of just left to his own devices. And also they had a recasting where the department head, the lieutenant of the department, was murdered by an assassin hired by the villain that they were chasing in the pilot episode. And so they finally went after him in this sort of revenge mission in Colombia. And so that's where one portion of the Miami Vice story arc ends. And then you get the rest of the show, the real Miami Vice, after that. So, like, first 6 episodes you see of the first series, you can think of it almost like a prologue of sorts. Show's still trying to find itself, figure out who they are and what they're doing. They really find their footing about 6 episodes in, and the rest is television history. Would you say your personhood has benefited or gained positively from the VTuber persona? Absolutely. Absolutely. I have put probably the best portions of myself into the essence of what is Lord Rexworth, and I think it has made me better overall as a person. I think I have. Other people might disagree, but I think it has. Kind and refined, but oh boy, mess with a friend or something, I can be something else entirely. Yes, pretty much the same. Megalum! Hello, hello. Good to see you. It's going all right. How are you? Yo, Miami Vice. Yeah. Watching a bit of a retrospective here, review.
Cool under pressure, but he's also weary, grumpy, quite cynical, and while he tries his best to put on a front, the job is slowly whittling him down to nothing, crushing his soul into a tiny cube and sucking out any remaining joy from Crockett's life.
Happened a lot with
Hey,
undercover
he gets to
cops.
drive a Ferrari without wearing socks. So, swings and roundabouts.
I got a feeling something's not right.
Don Johnson had been in a few features in the early 70s, but was finding it hard to get meaningful roles on television, where he'd appear in random episodes of weekly series or TV movies, and not always as the star.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know this. Don Johnson had tried and failed several times as sort of the leading man on a handful of television pilots in the 80s. All of them had been flops. And it was to the point where NBC and advertisers were really not sure about him. They're just like, I don't know, do we really want him in this role? Thank God they kept him in the role, because that's what he made a career out of. And it was good enough that he went over to another network in the 90s and did another successful show called Nash Bridges. Looks like he played a Rambo exploitation role at one point. Yeah, among other things. A little sick before Easter, though, trying to kick that. Oh, I am sorry, Megalum. Do hope you feel better in time for Sunday. Maybe a day's rest will do you good.
And he'd also made a lot of television pilots that were not sold. Miami
Yeah.
Vice would change that, where first he'd be that guy from Miami Vice to Don Johnson from TV's Miami Vice to Don Johnson, and then back again to that guy from Miami Vice to that guy from Nash Bridges to Dakota Johnson's dad, and finally to that guy from Miami Vice. He's looking pretty good.
You never know.
Just to
Don Johnson has aged really, really well. And he's actually a very multi-talented person. I think he not only starred in Miami Vice, Nash Bridges, lots of movies, and other really good television shows that came afterwards, but he's also a really good singer. He even released an album and had a music video that was directed by one of the directors, one of the regular directors of Miami Vice. It was called Heartbeat. It wasn't anything that was a chart topper back in the 80s, but it was still a good song. And the music video definitely had that whole 80s Miami Vice vibe to it, because so much of the crew from Miami Vice was involved with its production.
Sonny's clothes defined a level of 80s cool, so did Crockett's hairdos, where depending
I don't know about the hair, but the clothes, even today, I would dare say the Sonny Crockett look is still quite cool. Sorry about that, chat. Had somebody come in. Muted, yeah. Oh, welcome in, Level 1 Neko. Welcome in. Yeah, somebody walked in. I needed to talk to them about something real quick. Yeah, but I would dare say that the look that you see here, even though we're talking about a television show that is 40 plus years old now, still looks cool even today. And if a man wanted to walk around in unconstructed linen sport coat, t-shirt, or, you know, very light polo shirt, linen trousers, and loafers with no shoes, or maybe, you know, socks that don't really show, that look would still look cool even today. And in hot summer months in certain parts of the world, he would stay looking both cool and staying cool, like not getting too hot. Never personally been a fan of the unbuttoned shirt, no tie thingy. Personally, a suit looks oversized and a little too soft for my taste. It's a combination of that was the style of the time, sort of, you know, baggy and oversized. But there was also a technical element to that. That all of the clothes are supposed to be designer clothes. At one point, they even had Hugo Boss designing outfits for the show, and they also had Versace designing outfits for Crockett and for Tubbs and everybody else on the show. But the idea was that a lot of these designer clothes were seized as evidence in drug busts and then reused as part of a departmentally approved cover for Detective Crockett here. And so quite often, you know, if you're seizing clothing from the closets and the racks of crims from all over Dade County, well, all these people, they're not going to be wearing the same sizes. So some things are going to be a bit oversized, some things are going to be a bit tight. But it's all stuff that's handed out to him from the equipment officers, and, you know, he's just expected to make use of it to maintain his cover. So there's a bit of a technical aspect to it, but also that was sort of the style back then, or it was sort of even made into the style back then, because this was a show that it was a tastemaker for some time. You know, they started a lot of fashion trends. It's because of Miami Vice that the idea that men could wear pastel colors sort of became an acceptable thing. Not unlike overly tight, skinny lapel look of the early 2000s, prefer lapels wide and a suit fitting. Yes, ideally. Yeah, lapels actually need to be proportional to a person's body. Not too big, not too thin, just right. But quite often you can only get that with bespoke tailoring. Some pimp outfit. It lends authenticity and looks like what some sleazy drug money person would wear. It's a stereotype for a reason. Yeah, no, he had to look the part of a drug runner.
Depending on the episode, Sonny's hair is fashionably long, then it's fashionably short, then it's fashionably straight, then
Yeah, the hairstyles definitely changed with each season. Like this that we see here.
So did Crockett's hairdos.
That he started growing out almost like a mullet around the 4th season of Miami Vice and continuing that into season 5.
Depending on the episode, Sonny's hair is
It got really long towards the finale. And at one point, I think it got so long that he even put it up in a short ponytail. It coincided with a lot of other crime cinema of the time, fitting fairly well with the aesthetic of movies like Scarface. Yes, 1983, that one. Obviously, things look different between Miami Vice and Scarface, but it's close enough to be continuous with each other in style. Yes. And yet, hair is fine. You like that, eh?
Fashionably long, then it's fashionably short, then it's fashionably straight, then fashionably spiky, then fashionably long again, a ponytail, then fashionably swept and flowing.
Don't you just love the symmetry of it all?
The show helped popularize the phrase designer stubble, though.
Yeah. Also, another thing that you saw a lot with Crockett, quite frequently wearing stubble, except for like the third seasons 1 through 3, especially later part of 1 through season 3, didn't really do the whole stubble thing. But another thing that there was more detail and thought put into it than what people might expect. And Don Johnson was actually asked this question of, why does Sonny Crockett look so unkempt at times? Why does he look like he's got this really long stubble? And he said, well, quite often you have to remember that this character is on these stakeouts and working deep cover for long hours. And so quite often he doesn't have access to either an electric or manual razor and maybe some shaving cream to where he can, go into a bathroom somewhere, get some hot water and have himself a shave. So he'll let the stubble grow out for days, sometimes weeks on end. Always hated stubble because it looks lazy and unshaven and unclean to me. Yes, but there was a reason for that. Something to lend authenticity to the show, especially in the beginning. Later on, they didn't really go in for that, and he was much more clean-shaven, but he did let the hair grow out as time went on.
He's often clean-shaven in many episodes. Personally, I've had some very bad luck with my attempts at designer stubble. It's just been so uncomfortable, which is why I've never actually tried it on my face.
Yeah, I can go maybe a week not shaving, or a couple of days. After that, the stubble just drives me mad, and I have to shave.
I love it. Ricardo Rico Tubbs had been a detective in New York who came to Miami looking to bring down the man who killed his brother. Look, it wasn't me, I swear. I was nowhere near the bus station when it happened. Man, I've got to stop watching so many cop shows. It's making me paranoid. Once in Miami, he liked the place and got a job on the OCB, where he and Sonny would become partners and firm friends.
Real nice. What are you doing here?
Rico was the...
This was also one of the first shows that you saw on American television that was truly diverse. And I don't know if they were really aiming for that, or if they didn't. I don't know if they consciously went after it. They just wanted people that looked like they represented almost like a microcosm, or just gave some sort of demographic representation to the people who lived in Miami at the time. So you had white people, you had black people, And you also had Latinos. I think the character Gina Calabrese was this blend of Italian. She was of Italian and Cuban descent. So a little nod to the big Cuban American population that lives in and around Miami.
The looser of the pair, though he'd also have to pay a price for working such an intense job. Tubbs and Crockett were a team and they were pals. They were there for each other when things went poorly.
I just want to be there for you if you need me.
But they weren't against telling each other like it is when the other was getting in too deep.
Well, there's a thin line between hard work and obsession.
You're not in the process of forgetting you're a cop, are you?
Rico's working alias, or nom secret,
They
was
kept each
Rico
other
Cooper,
grounded.
and he mostly drove around in a classic Cadillac Coupe de Ville, and whenever undercover operations moved to the arrest phase, Rico would produce a previously unnoticeable shotgun from underneath his jacket. Now, that is the mark of a good tailor.
Calderon murdered my son and my woman.
Philip Michael Thomas had been working steadily on stage and television, where he was much more likely to pop up in the sort of program that we talk about on this channel than his co-star was. Miami Vice would be his highest profile television role, where he's forever known as that guy from Miami Vice. No.
Yeah, Philip Michael Thomas, his career sadly peaked with Miami Vice. And he never made it big in anything else after that. He had, I think, a guest appearance on Nash Bridges. He did a lot of stage work after Miami Vice. A lot of the actors that you saw in Miami Vice would go on to do a lot of stage work, especially the co-stars. Really, the only one out in the mall that had any sort of notable career after Miami Vice, Don Johnson and Edward James Olmos. And I would say that out of those two, Edward James Olmos had the more iconic career because had a lot of movies that he was in where he was just, again, iconic. Blade Runner, one of the first ones that springs to mind. There was also that one film where he was a teacher. Can't remember the name of it. And then, of course, he had his part much later in life with Battlestar Galactica. But Philip Michael Thomas, he had, like I said, guest appearance on Nash Bridges, did some stage work, came back and played Lance Vance in Grand Theft Auto Vice City and GTA Vice City Stories. But for the most part, that's been it. Didn't Miami Vice have a lot of small characters who turned out stars? A lot of guest appearances by people who became big stars. Yes. You had Julia Roberts in one of her first breakout guest starring roles. Bruce Willis before he got moonlighting and Die Hard. We saw brief appearance by the actor Stanley Tucci. Very early work by people like Ben Stiller, Wesley Snipes. Gosh, who else? You also had established actors and performers. We mentioned there was an episode James Brown was a guest star. Eartha Kitt was a guest star. Who else? Jeez. Oh, John Leguizamo played the son of Calderon, one of the ongoing nemesis. Who else? I don't know. There was a lot. There really was a lot. Like when you get to the thick moustaches of like Tom Selleck, it kind of becomes badass. Yeah. It's cute. Yeah. Philip Michael Thomas, always a handsome fellow. And I think he's also like his co-star Don Johnson, I believe he has aged rather well, although there's not a whole lot of photographs of him taken as of late because, again, doesn't really have much of a public life anymore. Face from the A-Team was in Battlestar Galactica. Oh, yeah. I know who you're talking about. I think it was the chap who played Barclay in Star Trek. I like that show, and they made it back to Earth just in time for the 80s, yeah. Heat in 1995 was also cool. Also, a Michael Mann film. Michael Mann being the executive producer and the showrunner for Miami Vice. So if you watch Miami Vice and you watch Heat, and you notice there's a lot of similarities in the sort of look and feel of both, you'll know why.
The other one. Rico didn't drink or smoke or eat meat, which are traits shared by Thomas, but Rico didn't share Thomas's immersion in New Age alternative spirituality, which is like traditional spirituality, but with a more recent copyright date.
And what are they gonna do? Cast a spell on me?
Philip Michael Thomas claims credit for the term EGOT, which of course is an Emmy, a Grammy, an Oscar, and a Tony, though he's actually not won any of them yet. Fingers crossed.
I think it's just another scam.
Unfortunate.
The other team members were often just there as backup to Crockett and Tubbs. While Crockett and Tubbs often posed as high-flying drug dealers, Gina and Trudy did most of the paperwork and research, while Zito and Switek were often involved in surveillance.
There was a couple of really good episodes, and one in particular in the first season where it did not focus on Crockett and Tubbs. It focused on Switek and Zito. A more light-hearted comedic episode, but it was a good one. And later on, John Deal, the actor who played Zito, he decided to leave the show, and so his character was killed off. And so that was an interesting two-parter where they basically halted all activity at Miami Vice, where they're on the hunt for a cop killer.
Side characters would often have a feature episode every season or two, but this was very much the Sonny Crockett show and also the Rico Tubbs show, and then everyone else got the crumbs. Sandra Santiago was Gina Calabrese, who at times early in the series shared a friends with benefits relationship with Sonny. At one point, she met an East German spy who was her mother's lover.
And that was... Damn, I know the actor's name. I think it's Jerome Kern or Kerb. I know he was in The Living Daylights. I think he was also in the Dynasty Reunion TV movie. He was good. He was also good in this episode. I think it was around the time that The Living Daylights was released.
In Cuba, and unofficially helps him track down the man who killed her mother. Another time, she fell for a fucking Egypt.
Liam Neeson. Yes.
Don't make me kill you!
Yes, they had an episode. It was the first episode in season 3. Liam Neeson was guest star, and it was Vice dealing with Irish terrorists who were trying to run weapons through Miami.
On other occasions, she allowed her cover to take precedence over her own safety. Though since this is Miami Vice, she does settle the score each time. Olivia Brown was her partner and best friend, Trudy Joplin.
Big booty Trudy.
After shooting a suspect, Trudy takes stock of her life and finds her boyfriend is close to a drug dealer, and she's conflicted about turning this into an investigation.
Being a cop doesn't make for a normal relationship.
She later discovers a rape victim has hired a hitman to kill her attacker. And of course, there's the UFO thing. Both women would divide their time between paperwork, research, using this newfangled thing called a computer, and undercover sting operations where they're dressed as hookers.
I got the looks, steady job. Cable? Cable TV, the works.
Michael Talbot was the Elvis-loving schlub Stan Switek, though to clarify that's Elvis Presley and not Elvis the alligator. Though outside of work hours, who knows? Switek's main specialities were experience with surveillance equipment, and when the bugging devices didn't work, firearms.
There's no time. Come get the bodies, guys.
His best buddy was partner Larry Zito, played by John Deal. where the pair were more casually attired detectives, providing a sharp contrast to the fancy threads sported by Crockett and Tubbs. Head of OCB was Lieutenant Rodriguez, played by Gregory Sierra, who was an easy-to-deal-with superior.
Yeah, they brought on Gregory Sierra because he had a long-running role in another NBC show, Hill Street Blues, and so they wanted his vibe and approach to heading up the Miami Vice division. Unfortunately, it didn't quite work out. I don't think he was, I guess the test audiences or whatever didn't really like him, or maybe he didn't want to keep having to go down to Florida to film. So he ended up leaving the show about 6 episodes in on the first series.
What, he dies at the start of the series? Man,
Yeah.
I thought it was done with the character sketches. Gregory Sierra apparently asked to be written off the series, and so a replacement
wasn't
character
happy.
was needed, and needed fast. That replacement character would prove to be very different.
I'm Lieutenant Castillo, your new boss.
Lieutenant Martin Castillo is softly spoken and unreadable as a human being, where he's able to rein in his team
He's
with
intense.
a whisper so powerful that it could instantly freeze a baked potato. The softer his voice, the more fucked you are.
You pulled the trigger. Now, live with the responsibility.
There was a baseless rumor circulated that Vice cops all needed to get their hearing tested when he took over because they all thought they had suddenly gone deaf at the same time. Edward James Olmos on screen is possibly the most intense actor
Yes.
that ever won the award for Most Intense Actor 5 years in a row. And of course he'd win it again years later when he played Commander Adama. Off screen, Olmos was a committed actor, but while studying his first script on the plane to Miami, he'd seen how, like other cop shows, Crockett and Tubbs would dismiss authority figures and scenes. Olmos was determined to not get stuck playing a loud buffoon, and so he delivered his scenes in a way that it was impossible for Crockett and Tubbs to be flip with Castillo. In his first
He's sort of chap that it's like, you cross him, you will regret it. So always giving that vibe of, don't fuck with me, you will follow orders. And that was a brilliant choice from Olmos.
episodes, Olmos didn't look at them while filming scenes, and it added attention to the scenes that worked, and so Olmos didn't look at either of the stars for something like the next 10 episodes.
Don't ever come up to my face like this again.
His way of creating his character didn't gel with Don Johnson, where a simple disagreement over Castillo closing his office door caused Don Johnson to keep the crew waiting for several hours. Johnson didn't want to deal with doors for whatever reason. Perhaps he'd been traumatized in his youth by the end credits to Get Smart.
Interesting theory.
Edward James Olmos was invested in projects that meant a lot to him, and when offered a regular role on the series, he initially declined on the basis that he couldn't sign an exclusive contract. Michael Mann kept offering more and more money until he finally offered Olmos a non-exclusive deal with the only caveat he just needed to give the production 60 days notice of his non-availability. It does sound reasonable though. In my line of work, when I don't want to show up for my shift at McDonald's, I just call them up 10 minutes before I'm supposed to start and tell them I contracted hand, foot and mouth disease, where my mouth and my foot are okay, but my hand is a total disaster.
I'll get in touch with you in a few days.
In interviews, Olmos comes across
Democracies
as a
don't
actor,
work,
but
yeah.
on-screen intensity is just him putting in the work.
It's what I am.
Castillo was a man of few smiles and even fewer decibels, and he would eventually receive a very involved backstory from when he was once a DEA agent in Southeast Asia, where things had gone badly. He had married, but things didn't end so well, and then he ended up as a cop in Miami. And of course, anytime somebody from his past turns up, murderous mayhem follows.
Right now, forget about him. Concentrate on the Yakuza.
The
Yeah, he's got one hell of a backstory, and it actually made him even more badass as time went on.
Vice Squad wages war on the drug trade, prostitution, gambling, and earth tones. It's an uphill battle trying to stifle human nature, but on the plus side, in Miami at least, the war on the color brown was well and truly won in the first season.
Yeah, that was ongoing rule with set design, wardrobe design, just the whole look and feel of the show was no earth tones and no red. Everything had to be, pastels or black and white, but no red and no earth tones. Looks weirdly futuristic to me. Yeah, I mean, it was the 80s. This was this was modern design back in those days. Nowadays, we look back at it and think of it as retrofuturism. More futuristic than a lot of interior design now. Yeah, back when they still put in thought to this sort of thing.
I didn't make that up.
Miami Vice didn't really do typical stories like most cop shows, but in general, Crockett and Tubbs would go undercover posing as drug dealers looking to buy some Colombian baking powder in order to take down this week's drug kingpin. There was always a different one every week. Crockett or Tubbs might get a little close to somebody involved in the trade, or there's some relatively innocent victim whose life is being destroyed by their proximity to the head of some crime organization.
Thinking about fun was like when you wanted to put some catnip in Elvis's kibble.
To maintain their covers, OCB would use items confiscated from previous busts.
Did you see him shoot Al, Quantum Leap? That's Sam stuck in a strong black woman's body forever. Yes. Damn, I forget the name of the actor, but yes, he had a guest role on Miami Vice.
Drugs used to tempt dealers, all the cash to buy drugs, and of course the fancy...
Oh, yes, and that was...
busts. Drugs used to tempt dealers, all the...
Ed O'Neill. One of his earlier roles in the, I think it was the second episode, first season, Miami Vice. We may need to do a watch party sometime of some Miami Vice episodes in the Discord server. Dean Stockwell, yeah, that's who I was thinking of.
Cash to buy drugs, and of course the fancy cars. They're all a result of OCB's successful convictions.
Almost all of the Mercedes that you see in Miami Vice were AMGs. Back when AMG was independent of Mercedes. So everything is either blacked out or, single paint job. Also saw a lot of Mercedes limousines on the show.
Most of Vice drive some older classic convertibles, such as Rico's Cadillac, but Sonny Crockett, living the high life as Sonny Burnett, lived on the boat, the St. Vitus Dance, and it had its own powerboat, and he also drove around town in various Ferraris.
Yeah, that one, the first Ferrari that he drove is a Daytona convertible, or Daytona Spider. It's actually not a real Ferrari. It was one of the budget limitations they had on the show at the time. The Daytona was already a very rare car, a very expensive car, so they couldn't afford it. So instead they went and found a kit car. It was actually a Chevy Corvette Stingray that had been converted over with the McBurney Coachworks body kit and made to look like a Daytona. And that's what they drove for the first two seasons. Show became really popular. Ferrari got word they were using a fake Daytona. They were quite upset with that, and so they contacted Michael Mann and the rest of the showrunners and said, if you want a Ferrari in the show, you could have always asked us for one. We will give you a brand new Ferrari. We'll give you two of them. And so they did. They gave them two brand new Testarossas in black with tan leather interior. They proceeded to paint both of them white on the outside. And they also had a stunt car, which was a De Tomaso Pantera, that they also kit-bashed that and made it look like a Testarossa. Took off the body panels of one of the real Testarossas in case they needed to mount cameras. And then the other one was just the regular car.
When Ferrari originally turned down requests to provide cars for the show, the producers found workarounds. Sonny's original car was a black 1972 Ferrari Daytona, though the examples used in the series were replicas. Ferrari wasn't so happy about that.
Something back.
And so from the third season, Ferrari relented and provided the show with two Ferrari Testarossa cars.
Absolutely essential for any type of serious police
Beautiful.
work.
But first, Sonny's original car had to be given a memorable send-off. That's still probably a better deal than what the dealers were offering for a trade.
The off-the-rack look seems to be in this year.
Crockett and Tubbs were the best-dressed cops on television. They were the anti-Columbos. But Miami, it has to be said, is often hot and even oftener humider. And so Don Johnson's look would be pared back to the minimum to cool down. So no belts, no socks, no undershirts. And if you take this to the logical extreme, a fully commando Crockett.
Think about it.
Miami Vice is a brutal show with lots of people dying in service of giving opportunities for Crockett and Tubbs to stare off into space.
Bob Balaban
Whether that's
guest
staring off
starring
into the far
twice.
distance, the middle distance, or just out of the eye line of the person you're talking to when you're having an awkward conversation with some person in an elevator and you can't remember if their name is either Terry or Tony. The real Miami at the time was often tarred with the epithet of the murder capital of America, and some of that at least is reflected at the end of the episode Freeze Frames.
Bang, you're dead.
Yeah. It's not so much anymore. It's more of a touristy type town. I think definitely still has its issues with crime. But yeah, back in the day, Miami and South Florida, really bad crime. Lots of drugs, lots of gangs. It was rough. The 80s were a rough time for Miami. And it was only shows like this that really started to turn around and started to give people like an interest in tourism. Yeah.
Series can be incredibly cynical in how it portrays unethical reporters or lawyers, but the show's real bite is reserved for other cops. Practically every other plainclothes law enforcement officer that you will meet in this series that is not a currently serving member of OCB is damaged in some way. Either they've been corrupted or have become obsessed or for some reason are in some way not an especially glowing example of law enforcement.
Bad cops, Rico. There's nothing lower.
Episodes, particularly from season 2 onwards, would often not end with an arrest, but with a villain ending up dead, either as a result of a shootout with the police or because some victim took matters into their own hands.
Bye, Daddy.
This happens so much you'd think court dockets or jails would be looking rather empty.
Surf's up, pal.
If this week's villain had anything to do with messing with members of OCB on a personal
Made for better
level,
television.
then that villain is almost certainly going to end up dead by the time the executive producer credit flashed on screen. But sometimes, just for a change, the antagonist will finish the job themselves.
Please don't.
Or being taken out by a civilian who's been adversely affected. And if Miami Vice don't kill him, then they'll finish the job. Honestly, throughout all 5 seasons of Miami Vice, you can pretty much count the number of villains who survived the episode on your fingers, and maybe a few toes. As a result, there are very few returning villains, which is obviously understandable, because unless reincarnation was part of the story, a second face-off was going to be, might difficult.
These two pay retail.
Some of those villains who did survive their first episode and return to the series will almost certainly be killed in the second episode. In episodes where the villain doesn't die or return to be killed, some innocent person, or at least a good-hearted type who got in over their heads, they'll instead be killed. I mean, you got to kill someone. That's why my latest business venture,
Someone has to
Miami Undertaking,
die.
is being listed on the New York Stock Exchange, and according to Reddit, it's going to the moon. So,
All right, we'll go ahead and move on. Because we are only 16 minutes into this, and I've been tangenting too much.